Ashen one, hearest thou my voice still?
Hello, War of the Visions fans. I'm Jackie Fox. We now have Volke here in Global. We also have news of the upcoming and, current Final Fantasy VII Advent Children collaboration in JP. We have the first new units that are kind of power scaled to Ashen Mont level. We even have one of these characters in Global, even though I think that maybe long term, much like kind of my opinion of probably where Cloud is going to be. If you're interested, long term, I think that Cloud and June probably aren't as good as this unit. But on the other hand, I think both of them work really well together, which is a big benefit to them. But also, both of them are very well suited for where we are in the meta right now, and are just excellent units themselves. And, they're all in their own kind of power tier above everything else, in part because they just have bigger stats. Like, they are incredibly fast, typically. They have as much HP as comparable tanks do in some cases, and they have, attacking stats that are out of this world, along with kits that break the boundaries of what this game has been able to do and completely redefine the way that metas work by adding in effects that just weren't possible before and allow you to do things that weren't possible before. They're just, it's a whole season of game changers. And among them, I think that this is probably going to be the strongest one long term. Even if we see a meta wind unit come that's power scaled to this level, that's maybe 100 cost as well. I mean, it'd be really interesting if they were 90 cost. Not only to give us another 90 cost unit, but also to not directly compete with this guy, give him a little bit of space, because story-wise he is supposed to be incredibly powerful, and it would be nice for him to be able to just be that for a while. But his problem right now, and the reason why I would say that both of those characters are going to be a lot more popular, immediately speaking, is that he's a knight. That's one of the issues, right? So, as a knight, he doesn't really have any great job-based teams, and while you can run him with King Bradley and get some knight synergies there, there's not necessarily a great third unit for him to play with in Knight necessarily. I think Celeste is interesting, and I'm certainly going to try that, but I think that works better as like a defense bait team than it does really much of anything else. But there really aren't that many good Knight teams for him, and Earth, while it's doing well for an element, elements aren't really the best way to think about the game right now, and while it's taking a little bit of time for the job teams to emerge, when you find them, they are incredibly powerful. So him being the highest power unit we have isn't super important if you can't put him on a team that more shares that power level, where Joom and Cloud especially having a synergy together is just going to be a really big deal. And especially Sephiroth and Gadaj also having a job synergy together. These two job types are really going to get shoehorned into the meta in a way that Ashen Mont won't be. But at the same time, I do think he's stronger for reasons that we're going to talk about. So first, let's talk about his armor. Great defense and spirit. Also a lot of HP. This just has a lot of heavy stats on it. It's going to increase his human killer for 4 turns with physical attacks. AoE resistance 20 for 4 turns, and strike resistance 25 for 4 turns. Anybody who can wear armor can equip this, so basically any armored unit can now become even more strike resistant. For a unit like Oldoa, for instance, this could make her 100% strike resistance with the right build around her. So, this could be a relatively nutty TMR. I think it's great, especially the human killer with physical attacks. There's a lot of, follow-up attacks and stuff that could really benefit from that. And 25 is quite a bit. His master ability, usually master ability ones don't really do much, but this master ability is pretty massive. It feels like a master ability 2 in some ways. But you get the normal increasing earth attack and HP for earth allies, but in addition to that, you get strike attack resistance penetration 20, AoE resistance 10, and as a passive effect, the ability to inflict silence, 25% chance if you have one of the following effects active, and that is auto restore. Which I think is AP auto restore, like a Bell's effect. Or regen. I think it's AP regen though. And then Dream ability, he gets 3 things for this, and they're all relatively big. Debuff effect weakening, reaction block rate of 30, debuff effect weakening was 20, which is relatively standard. All 3 of these actually, the critical evasion 15, all relatively standard. It's just usually people only get 2. And there are instances where you get 3 stats, but you usually don't get like the standard rate. You get discounted stats, but these are all big too. So they're really pulling out all the stops on his stats so far. So let's look at kind of what that does in total for him. And with Dream Awakening, we're looking at, I mean, this is a bit more HP than Cloud or Tifa had. The attack is a bit lower, so not as high of attack, but that's okay. His agility is higher even than Cloud, who was the faster of the 2 other ones, and I really think this is gonna make it maybe possible to, you know, get a kind of new tier of fastest units in the game very quickly, which is gonna be interesting because speed is king. 25% slash resistance, -10 to spears, no resistance to missile, 10% to fist, 15% to magic, although he doesn't necessarily need a ton of magic resistance if you can find a way to consistently get him to throw that silence onto people. He's also resistant to poison, which is helpful. Stun, so he's going to be good against Vivi, Snow, those units that really lock up games with stun. He's going to be able to deal with. And then blindness 10%, which isn't a lot, but okay, helpful. Moving into passives, this one looks pretty mandatory. HP heal, defense penetration, a lot of attack, that looks great. Even more attack here, accuracy, decrease evasion rate. If you're not playing him as evasion, that could work well for you, but evade, at least some degree of evade is an option here. Debuff effect weakening and HP is an interesting set of choices. And then we have pugilist stuff. So HP and attack, that could be pretty helpful. Flurry counter and accuracy. I don't really think this guy needs it. I think this is a better accuracy get for you. You're probably not going to want flurry counter. His main counter is a lot longer range, 30% chance to counter all damage. Is equal to flurry counter. Damage is equal to flurry counter. But in addition to that increased range, 35% chance to inflict sleep for 3 turns. Interesting. So he can put you to sleep with his counterattack and has the HP of a tank. Well, that's certainly interesting. Basic attack is a bit weak in range, but restores 200 CT, which is going to be about 20% of a turn for him. Then we have a skill that is going to give him courage, AP auto restore of 10%, which is fairly high, and then defense penetration of 30 as well. So this could easily get him up to 70 defense penetration. This is activating his silence on hit as well from his passive, because yeah, this is auto restore AP. Now, so I don't think that regen triggers this. Maybe I misunderstood what someone was saying, but I'm not sure that, maybe that's auto restore HP and both of them work. I don't know, but this is really looking like it's the bells effect that's triggering the silence. Then we have a skill that reduces physical damage 50% 4 times for self. This is similar to the 4 turn effects that we're starting to see. Instead of 3 turns, this is 4 times instead of 3 times. Reducing physical and magical damage larger the attack size up to 35% for 4 turns for allies. So that's big. That can put a lot of AoE type resistance on yourself and others. Also, this one gets upgraded. Why am I reading that one? What is the upgrade? Oh, single target resistance 25 4 turns for allies. So this is AoE and single target resistance all in one. Characters haven't had this. The characters haven't even come close to having this in a lot of ways. Like, yeah, there are TMRs that can give you a single target resistance or AoE resistance buff that you can add to the kit of a unit that already has the other. But nobody has both of these things in their kit, for one. And nobody has both of these things in one buddy buff. But also, I'm not even done yet, because it grants the following effect upon hit for self, in addition to that silence effect, if you still have your AP restore going. Seals barrier destruction for 3 turns for 4 turns. So you'll be sealing their barrier destruction for 3 turns, and you'll be able to do this upon attack for 4 turns. Hopefully that made more sense than the last time I had to explain one of those. Look, even I was confused when I had to edit that. This next attack is going to be a big boy if they have haste, and haste is really common and popular. So that's going to increase the modifier by 80%, and that's going to bring the modifier for this skill up to 245, which is actually higher than the limit burst upgrades for the units that got them today. They only went up to 240. It's also going to dispel haste for targets because it is an AoE skill. It's going to dispel follow-ups for targets, which is also a brand new ability to be added to this character. There's not a ton of characters that have follow-up stuff. However, with him being an earth unit, this is especially good as a counter into lightning right now, especially into teams like Lightning and Astrius, which is really one of the few teams where you have a strong synergy and you have multiple units that do that follow-up damage. I guess maybe like Noctis and 2P, but that's nowhere near as meta. But there aren't a lot of places where this is really going to hit hard, but when it connects, it's definitely going to connect, and no one else can do that, so it's certainly special, at least for now. But here's the really big boy. You can select up to 2 targets to decrease single target resistance 60% for 3 turns. That's a big deal. That is a big deal. Now this gets upgraded to also increase your slash attack resistance penetration by 30 before dealing damage. So even more penetration. It's a single target attack that gets rid of most of your single target attack resistance. It's also a slash attack that gives you 30% slash attack resistance penetration, all before doing damage. I mean, you almost don't have to build him to hit hard with this attack. It then attacks with a 200% mod and has a 25% chance to inflict silence for 3 turns, in addition, I guess, to your already, if you have AP, I guess, AP restore. And then, when enemy target is killed, automatically cast another skill that gives you a CT boost. This is going to be a 200 CT boost, so 20% of a full turn for each enemy KO'd, and you may KO multiple, so you could get up to 2 bits of a full turn back just by casting this, which is kind of nuts. And then we have another select up to 2 targets attack break physical barrier for target, so he's going to be really effective at destroying barriers, in addition to his ability, at least physical barriers, in addition to his ability to protect your party's own barriers. He's going to decrease debuff effect weakening 50% just for this cast for target. And then he's going to hit with a 200% mod, plus 30% hit chances, a high accuracy attack, and then it's going to decrease healing power by 50% for 3 turns. Now, I want to be clear here, this debuff effect weakening is a really powerful mechanic. It is very important that it is only for this cast. And if this effect were applied to the other select 2 target attack that's decreasing single target resistance by that much, like if you had no way of resisting that as a debuff at all, that would be really scary, because at least there is some counterplay by decreasing your debuff ability. That still doesn't change the slash attack resistance penetration of 30 on that attack, so it's still cutting through on characters like that, and I'm really interested to see how much that can be resisted. If this was on that, this would be really bad. But it is pretty significant that he can decrease healing power 50 on 2 targets, and that there is no, or that you can only really mitigate 50% of that at best. I'm not sure that there's a lot of people who are playing heavy defense on their healing power, or, you know, thinking about debuffability on those type of units. But there are definitely units that apply to this that could, through debuff effect weakening, protect their healing power in this way that would be more affected by this. But, you know, when you look at it on paper and you hear that he has this debuff effect weakening decrease effect, you might think that, like, oh, he's just an absolute single target menace, and he is. But thankfully these two do not overlap. That was one of my early fears about his kit from some of the things that I'd heard. Main sub, is this like wave cutter? Yeah, 15 AP for kill. And yeah, basically like wave cutter, Ian, whatever. He can also blind people. Interesting AoE pattern, but I mean, look, this might be weird, right? But I think there is at least an outside chance that you may run this guy with higher than average faith. I know he's not a mage, but this guy's got a lot of status all throughout his kit. Sleep, blind, silence, it's everywhere. So, especially if you're running something like this, maybe you are going for a more status mode Mont, which was one of the cooler things about King Mont that really evened him out early on, because he was technically bad into mages, but he also just disabled them when they got near him often. So this is a way of playing with him. Maybe you only go up to like 70, 72, 74 faith, but that would definitely increase the consistency of those. Showing that even alternate reality Mont grows up to be kind of the same. He is also a Nightblade like his tank counterpart. And I think kind of gets all the same moves. This last skill here looks pretty cool. Vitalize effect, AoE vitalize, slash attack up, defense penetration up. That's, well, defense penetration is only for you, but you know, these two things on your allies, defense penetration on you, was this concentration. Good skill. I think that could be helpful on him, especially since, you know, you can turn up the slash attack resistance penetration in his main job kit, but not defense penetration. It is good to get that in there to supplement. Pugilist. I mean, this skill could be good. This skill could be good. It's good that he got all the ones that like increase modifier for taking damage, because he could be really, really resilient in taking a lot of damage. Also kind of defensive stuff here. So this is a more defensive thing. You can get him in range for stuff, which could be really good for him, because you kind of want him to move into the middle of the enemy ranks and to be able to attack outwards. That's how these select target attacks kind of prefer to function. They have a very defend the center strategy, it seems. So that could work, and 2 ways to restore HP that kind of overlap with each other. I'm not sure that he necessarily needs this. I'm not saying, by the way, that you wouldn't want to go with something that's going to be healing him. Like, for instance, maybe you want to go with a blood sword for this guy because he can't equip regular swords. I know it looks like he has a great sword, but he is a regular sword unit, so he can equip the blood sword +1. You could also... No, he's an armor user. I doubt he's a cloth boy. Like, his original Mont form could wear cloth. Not a thing. I don't think it's a thing for King Mont either. So no cloth, so no Rubis battle dress, so maybe the blood sword is the only way to get him to restore HP outside of this, but honestly I think if you do that, that's great. This might provide some... no. I mean, I guess this job maybe gets more interesting for chaining with Veritas of the Earth, who I think is a really like modern tank which will solidify and take over Dialdo's role very easily, especially within this team. So maybe this works better with him, but I'm not really excited by it. I think really I'm most excited by concentration out of all of his Subjob stuff. That's about it. And then for his limit burst, select up to 2 targets, decrease single target resistance by 20. This is not one of those percentage based things like his previous attack or Tifa's attack that we've also talked about in a previous video. This is 20% base, so if they only have 20 single target resistance, it is basically 100% of it. Not that there are many units that often run that low anymore. When casting another attack, also launch the following skill on target, and it is a follow-up damage skill, high range, for 3 turns. Shouldn't interrupt chaining, doesn't have an attack type. Wow, those the way that its damage is calculated are really spread out. So he has a follow-up skill here. 240 mod, which is pretty darn high. 49 AP isn't too bad. And then it's going to grant him haste. And that's a 42% increased speed. That's going to make him incredibly fast for 3 turns. Whew. Yeah, this guy's going to be an absolute monster. And I think that, like, in terms of him as a unit, he is still probably even stronger than units that are being released today, will be released next week or even the week after or the next month on JP. And I think, you know, especially as being an end of another story arc character like Raph, although Raph wasn't the best example because she came kind of before a power spike as opposed to at the beginning of one in some ways. You know, she was more in the place that like Aldoa, but you know, she was the end unit for season 2 and she stuck around in the meta for quite some time and is still prominent today. And Astrius has really only recently fallen off, and he's finding new livelihood on katana teams and maybe even water katana teams with Kadaj in the game. So, you know, units like this in his position often last in the meta for a very long time and are incredible investments. Like, they're typically the pull of the year that you least reconsider or regret. Even more so than some of the Final Fantasy VII Advent children. I think he's going to be really important. That being said, the future is really open-ended right now and hard to predict, as every new release seems to be redefining the meta in some way over the last couple of weeks, with no signs of ever really stopping or slowing down soon. So what the things that make him good could mean less by the time that we get a team for him to be good on. But I think that there's every indication outside of him just having an issue with teammates at the moment for his job class that he's going to be a strong unit now and maybe even stronger into the future, because we do know the Veritas of the Earth is coming, slow as it may seem. So by the way, if you need a new guild, check out either Silkis, jeez, Sylkis, or Gysahl Union, Gysahl Union. Both guilds are accepting new members. One is in Master 3 and climbing. The other is in Taurus 3 and hopefully still climbing. We can get some rough competition up there sometimes, but whichever one of those seems right to you, if it's better than your current guild and you want to earn those rewards faster, then feel free to hop into one of those guilds. But we do know this unit is coming and will solidify the Earth side of this team, but we don't really... there aren't any knights on the horizon other than this guy. So it's a little bit up in the air, his future, but and especially compared to those other units that we've discussed that have a much more obvious place in the meta right now. But all of that being said, I think he's strong enough that wherever he is used, he will be incredibly powerful for a long time to come. I think that most of these units make great investments into the future, but I think that Ashen King, out of all of them, might be the absolute best. And unlike Volke, who seems like the fucking poster child, he's the Raldor of, like, this power creep. Like, I've often talked about how... specifically, like, the first time when we went from level 99 as the level cap to level 120 in the game, there were like 3 units released right before that: Nivlu, Sakura, and Raldor. Sakura especially was very powerful and remained powerful for a while just because she was faster than everyone else and could take people out before, she was an assassin, essentially, in a lot of ways, in like her style of gameplay, and that hasn't really been super feasible ever since because... with more characters hitting 120 and her not getting her 120 form for a while, she just couldn't take them out. Like, she wasn't ending fights early for characters in the same way that she could before, and people were wiping her out in retaliation, as honestly they always kind of did. So for all 3 of it, and she was the most playable. Like, Nivlu and Raldor, while they had their perks and their benefits, they just didn't make it into the future well, and they're what I call armpit units, to where they're right there at that curve where the line of power goes straight up. And like, another example of this I always bring up is Kuja, Angel of Death in FFBE, to where like everybody knew that Neovisions were coming, and everyone was saying that like, hey, wait for Neovisions, and they released Kuja, Angel of Death, and they're like, oh my god, he's so powerful, this is Neovision level power. And then we got Neovisions, and not only were they more powerful and more versatile than Kuja, but also very, very quickly they overwhelmed him in power to the point where you basically never saw him, despite him being one of the coolest and most powerful units at the time of his release. Like, just an absolute badass. They did my boy wrong, is what I'm getting at here. And poor Kuja, but also poor Volke. And, I don't think that's as true of the other tanks, and there's definitely, like, Volke will definitely remain good, because the thing to remember, especially 4 years into this game, is that people are using what they have for the most part. There is a portion of this player base that is constantly cycling through the newest stuff, but if you have 1 or 2 new units, you're going to be able to, whether it's Oldoa and Volke or Ashen, Mont, and A2, you're going to be able to rip through a lot of the units in this game with some planning and strategy. So it's not that these are necessarily unusable units, but compared to what came after them, they just they don't keep up in the same way. And even things that come out after this Mont here don't necessarily keep up with his power level. So even though they try, even though they are kind of in a class of their own and kind of a redefinition of what the power is like, I think they're a little bit more cautious than this first attempt was. And I think that that's going to mean that he's going to retain a lot of power, a lot of use, a lot of versatility for a long time. He's also going to be a slightly less limited unit than the Advent Children collaboration, which, honestly, now we're talking about like a compilation of Final Fantasy collaborations. If it's already taking Final Fantasy VII long enough to get their limit burst enhancements, then what do you think the chances of like getting to that point with Advent Children is? I don't know. That's just a constant anxiety that I've had throughout this game, that the update schedule for collaboration units is really slow. But thankfully for the Ashes of the Apocalypse or any of the another story type characters, the update schedule for that seems to be a little bit faster, thankfully. And then, global exclusive, in some ways that's true, but also it really feels like it's whenever they feel like getting around to them. So I don't know, hard to say that, but those are my thoughts on Ashen Mont. I think for now, because of the strength of ice, he makes a lot of sense on an ice team. I think that there's units coming that are definitely going to benefit that strategy, like Tifa, into the future. But also, he's definitely going to be a power partner with Bradley. And I think going Evasion, either through 2P or Lucio, is probably the ideal third for that, until we get kind of a more modernized tank than Dialdo. Dialdo might be able to handle that, but it's just kind of harder to recommend him as a tank for kind of a top tier team like this. So while Mont and Bradley are definitely going to be a really intimidating pair to deal with, Dialdo isn't quite as scary. That being said, he's the best we've got right now, and it's going to be a while before we're really 140ing our Veritas of the Earth. So maybe it's best for now. But also, once again, like, there's a lot of ways to combine him into an Earth and Ice team, and there are some vision cards and such that actually support that exact strategy. The other thing I would say, going the other direction, is putting, say, a Water Knight up front and then running him with Bradley as a way to bait in Lightning teams. Lightning teams are kind of perennially popular, and as we see every time I look at the most used units in Guild Battle, Cloud is still on that list, y'all. Not even Advent Children Cloud. I'm talking about the global list. He isn't even here yet. We're still playing with Cloud, the original. So, there's always going to be those Lightning teams to get baited into this within Guild Battle, and you can profit from that. If you have Celeste, I think she's the ideal one. There's definitely other Water Knights, like maybe in limited cost you could use Terrell or something, but I think Celeste is probably my favorite for this application, just because she's one of my favorite knights as it is, and she fits into the elemental strategy here. So all that being said, thank you so much for tuning in. It has been a bit of a long one, but I think that this is a unit that you have to understand before he comes out. You gotta be saving for this guy, and if you're thinking about Advent Children, you really want to consider if you want to skip this guy, because I think he's probably, generally speaking, a number one priority. But at the same time, as I always say with units, there's always something coming around the corner that's going to be more specific to the jobs that you prefer, to the elements that you play with. So if this guy isn't fitting into your teams, don't pull for it. But at the same time, he's definitely going to be a strong unit. Any way that you could utilize him effectively is going to be quite strong and has potential to get stronger, much stronger into the future, in a way that I'm not as sure of some of these other units. On the other hand, if you want things that work right now and maybe require a the other downside, is require a large viz commitment. If you've already bought Joom, well, then Cloud might be a bit of a stretch, especially if you already have A2 too. That's a lot of spending back to back. Same for Kadash and Sephiroth being released a week off of each other. That's pretty tough as well. So, maybe there are reasons that if you're trying to do like a slower combo, maybe more free to play friendly, the spacing of Mont not having a super synergistic unit, or his super synergistic unit being a slow build guild battle unit, coming out with him, leaves you time to save for when they do finally release that unit, that either as being a powerful knight or being a powerful earth unit really brings this team into something that can dominate the meta and maybe even bring earth, or earth up to 9, or push other things down in comparison maybe, or bring knight maybe into A tier or even S tier potentially. Who knows? The future is a wild, wild place. And since you've been watching this video for this long, I'd like to encourage you to like, subscribe, and check out the link in the description if you just want to hear more of my voice. You've been here for over 30 minutes at this point. I hope I'm having a relaxing effect on you and the way you feel, and I hope you're excited also for this stellar unit, because he's probably one of the most exciting ones that we've talked about in a while, and he's definitely going to be very dominant and oppressive. And in some ways it's kind of exciting that while that the future is unclear for him, while also full of possibility. So again, just as a quick recap, probably the strongest unit in the game, and probably will remain so on paper for quite some time, even though the units that are being released after him seem to be power scaled to be closely in line with him. He's just a little bit better and does a little bit more than even the newest units that we're seeing. So definitely a high watermark for now, but his downside is his real lack of teammate synergies. That being said, there are teams that he works on and he is a powerhouse on them, and definitely puts in a lot of work of making those teams top tier, but he could do even better, and that's incredibly scary, but only time will tell. But yeah, like and subscribe, check out the link in the description, buy some of my books, I'd really appreciate that. And with all that being said, I'll see you in the next one.